maybe these deals aren't even big enough to respond to the challenge that we're facing with China right now. So I think it really comes down to your perspective on how much of a threat do we face from China, how imminent is that, and what do we have to do to prepare for that?
Welcome to The Debrief, where we talk with the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the headlines they're covering and where the story's going next. I'm Sarah Bedford, and I'm here with policy editor Joe Lawler. And Joe, this week, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the U.S. would be establishing price floors for some critical sectors. What is the significance of that announcement?
Yeah, this is really all about conflict with China. So over the long term, it looks like the U.S. is being drawn more and more into tensions with China on both the trade front, but also more importantly on the national security front. And China has control over certain key elements for our supply chains that in a scenario where we were in open conflict with them would be a huge problem. So one of these that you might have heard a lot about are critical minerals that are used for defense applications and clean energy and other things. And China has mostly control of that supply chain. It's not a huge problem. We could develop these things ourselves over the years if we had to, but China's provided them cheaply for us for a long time. So the question for the Trump administration, for Scott Bessent, which he's referring to, is how do we get these produced domestically? And one way of doing that is saying we'll give a minimum price to anyone who can produce these here in the U.S. So we'll create demand for these products, and the supply then will be established. So we'll say we'll pay $100 per kilo or whatever for this mineral, and that will allow us to set up our own miners, our own processors, and have it built here in the U.S. That's the thinking behind it.
So critics have accused the Trump administration, this isn't the first sort of unusual market intervention that they've had. They said, this isn't really conservative, and it sets a bad precedent. But Bessent was talking about how, when you're competing with a non-market economy like China that has, advantages because of that, the U.S. has to sort of think outside the box. Where do you fall on that sort of spectrum of like it's super bad or like it's super necessary?
Yeah, the question is really, is it necessary for national security? That's what it comes down to, right? If you can imagine a situation where we can't get the drones or tanks that we need because China has the supply chain and it's going to take us 2 or 3 years to stand these things up, then the argument might be that we're not even doing enough to get these things nearshored or built and produced in the U.S. So yes, you certainly have the free market critics who note that the Trump administration is now doing these things to intervene in the private sector directly, including not just price floors, but I think, as you just mentioned, taking direct stakes in miners, having golden shares in U.S. Steel, and meddling, you might say, in actual business decisions, like they're in the boardroom with the corporate directors as they're planning their business. Certainly that free market critique is there, but you also hear from the business sector, maybe they should be doing more. Maybe these deals aren't even big enough to respond to the challenge that we're facing with China right now. So I think it really comes down to your perspective on how much of a threat do we face from China, how imminent is that, and what do we have to do to prepare for that?
So Trump once again threatened, even more massive tariffs on China. I don't know how big the percentage is at this point. It's like really high, right?
Yeah.
And, it's not clear, did those go into effect? Is it another taco situation, as the libs love to say?
Yeah.
Like, it is this escalating trade war happening at the same time as the U.S. is rolling out this policy and others. Is that timing coincidental, or is this all part of a strategy, and like where's that going?
Right. I think that the sense is that this timing is being driven by the scheduled meeting between Trump and the Chinese leader Xi at the end of this month. And so you're seeing some saber rattling and some verbal, rhetorical escalations ahead of that. In the past, as you say, the taco, Trump always chickens out. That's happened so far. And you've seen other Trump officials like J.D. Vance and Bessent himself kind of downplaying the severity of this one. You have to separate the trade part of it from the national security part of it. So I think that it is likely that we'll once again see some kind of compromise on trade. Trump obviously fundamentally considers himself a deal maker, and he'll be looking for a deal with China that can provide him a win to present to voters here in the U.S. But the national security aspects are different, and what's implicated in that specifically are we don't want China to have our cutting edge technology that could be used to develop weapons or artificial intelligence that could hurt us in a military escalation situation. And that's what the latest move by China to say we're going to withhold these rare earth elements and other critical minerals. That's why that was kind of a bit more frightening than what they've threatened in the past.
Well, Joe, thank you for teaching me about all these things. I appreciate it. You can get more from Joe and the rest of the policy team at washingtonexaminer.com.